Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. Here is this week's meals for you. So the very first recipe we are going to do is a Tortellini Primavera. It was delicious. I highly recommend this recipe. It turned out really well. I had actually borrowed that cookbook from my local library and got a whole bunch of really delicious recipes from it. I was able to find it online and I did link it for you guys so that you can have a linkable or referenceable recipe for this, because it was really good. So first of all, what we're gonna do is we are gonna start by chopping up about 3 carrots. I peeled and diced them pretty small because I wanted them to be pretty good bite-sized pieces. I also chopped up some ham that I had in my freezer. I'm trying to really go through my freezer because we're gonna be making a huge ham for Christmas, and I'm trying to clean out the old ham that I'd already had in there. That is actually a really good money-saving tip, is to buy ham right now because it is on sale for the Christmas or holiday season. It's a really good price. So if you buy it now and make it, or even just not even necessarily making it, you could just buy it and put it in your freezer. But if you buy it and make it, then you already have pre-cooked meat that all you have to do is thaw out. One thing that I love to do with this pre-cooked ham, other than like making dishes like this, I love to dice it up, make it into omelets, or even just taking these, what I call ham steaks, and then just frying them. It goes perfect, especially with some mashed potatoes or scalloped potatoes. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put about 2 tablespoons of butter into a skillet, and then we're gonna add our pre-chopped carrots. This recipe also called to use 1 cup of cauliflower broken into small pieces, but I decided to add broccoli instead because we had had cauliflower a couple nights previous to this. Then you're gonna add in about 3 cloves of minced garlic, and then if you want 1 whole medium onion finely chopped, I just chose to use granulated onion powder instead. The recipe suggests using a 1/4 cup of white wine in this. I didn't have any white wine, so I subbed it with some white wine vinegar, which is fine if you don't use the full amount. It does mimic the wine taste a little bit, but just make sure you just don't dump a huge amount in there. And then I also added a 1/4 cup of chicken broth to this, 1/3 cup of a heavy cream, and 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. And I just used the pre-grated stuff. This was not fresh. You want to let that cook for about 2 to 3 minutes until the liquid reduces a little bit. In the background there, I'm just getting my cheese tortellini all cooked up. You want to just cook it according to the directions on the package. This was like a Sam's Club or a Costco one, so I think it only took like 4 minutes to cook. So while that was cooking, and once that sauce was thickened up, I came back in and I added in my diced ham. You want to add about 3/4 to 1 cup of the diced ham, and then you're going to come in and add 1 cup of frozen peas. So what you want to do is heat that sauce up until those peas start to melt. Once it is hot, then you are going to stir in your already cooked tortellini. It says check for the seasoning, so just come in if you need to. Come in and add some salt, some pepper. I actually came in and added a little bit of additional Parmesan because I just wanted it extra cheesy. I love cheese. So that was the meal. It was so quick to make, and it was really delicious. Steven usually doesn't eat peas, and I just told him, I said, this recipe needs the peas, pick them out. I just ended up putting them in, but it was really good. So the next meal we're gonna make is a venison stroganoff. This recipe was kind of a hit and miss. Steven loved it, but I think there was maybe something wrong with the recipe somewhere because it recommended to use an ingredient and it recommended to use an excessive amount of it. You'll find out what I'm talking about. We're gonna get started with getting all of the mushrooms cut up. It calls for 8 ounces of a button mushroom. I believe I used a baby bell mushroom and it worked good. So next we're gonna take one of our venison loin roasts, and this was huge. I think this was probably maybe like 3 to 4 pounds. I ended up using just a small amount of this, and the other amount I actually ended up cutting into cubes and just put back into the freezer, and then I'm gonna actually use that as a stew beef in the future. Anyways, I took that venison and I cut it up into thin little strips. Next, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter to my large skillet, and I'm going to add add the sliced mushrooms to that. I'm gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper to that. I probably use about half a teaspoon of both of them. And then I'm just gonna saute these mushrooms until they are tender and nice and cooked through. Once they get to that point, I'm just gonna take them and set them aside in a bowl. Next, we're gonna take our sliced venison and we're gonna season it with salt, pepper, and then about a 1/4 cup of an all-purpose flour. You just wanna make sure that it's well coated with the flour and the seasoning. Then we're gonna take another 2 tablespoons of butter, put that into the skillet, get it good and melted, nice and brown, and then we're gonna add our venison to that. Now you wanna work in batches because you do not wanna overcrowd this. You're just getting the venison just barely cooked. It's kind of like a steak in a way. Like you don't want it too overcooked because you don't wanna make it tough. So we're just gonna brown it on both sides. Once it is browned, we're gonna remove it from the skillet and we're gonna add it to the same bowl that we put our mushrooms in. I also forgot to mention at the beginning, I am using about 1 pound of venison for this. So you're gonna take 1/3 cup of a red wine after you've taken the venison out of the pot, and you are just going to deglaze the pot with that red wine. I had to come in and just add a tad bit more than the 1/3 just to get all that stuff off the bottom. You're gonna take that red wine reduction and you're gonna pour it into the same bowl that has your mushrooms and your venison. Then you're gonna melt some more butter. This recipe has a lot of butter. And then if you are using, you can melt an onion at this point. You want to use 1 cup of onion thinly sliced. You also wanna add 2 cloves of garlic. I just used a teaspoon of minced garlic. And then you are going to saute that until the onion is translucent and the garlic is nice and fragrant. Once that happens, you are going to add that meat, mushroom, and the wine back into the skillet, and you're also going to add in 1.5 cups of a beef broth. You can also use a venison broth in this if you'd like, or a vegetable broth. The recipe says to let this mixture get nice and thick. After about 20 minutes, it still was not thickening up, so I came in and just added a little bit of an arrowroot slurry, so it was just about a teaspoon of arrowroot and some water to that, and it thickened up nice. So once it is thickened to your desire, you're going to take it off of the heat. Now this is where it went terribly wrong for me. The recipe says to use 1 pint of sour cream. 1 pint equals 2 cups. That is an excessive amount, in my opinion, of sour cream. Usually when I make like a stroganoff, it's like 1 cup of sour cream. This sour cream overpowered the whole recipe. It was just too much for me. I also added half a teaspoon of dry parsley leaves and a 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme, and then some salt. I was trying to cut that sour cream taste out. Stephen loves sour cream, so he loved this dish. But next time I make it, because it was a really good meal, except for the sour cream. So next time I make it, I'm probably gonna come in and only add 1 cup of sour cream because it was a lot. But other than that, it was good. For the next meal, we are going to make one that turned out really delicious. It is a Hungarian potato goulash. Now the original recipe actually called it a red potato goulash because it called to use red potatoes in it. I didn't have any, so I just used about 4 pretty large size, I think these were white potatoes or they were russets. Either way, it worked perfectly fine. If you are using the red skin potatoes, just use 10 medium sized ones, and you want to peel them and you want to slice them about 1/2 inch thick into circles. Because they were pretty big potatoes, I just ended up cutting the circles in half. Then you're going to take 14 ounces of a smoked sausage. I just used a kielbasa in this, and it was just one that I got at Sam's Club. And then I'm just slicing it. It says to slice them into medallions, so you want to leave them somewhat pretty thick. Then to a large sauce pot, you're going to add about 1 tablespoon of oil, and you can use any oil of your choice. I used an avocado. And then you are just going to saute these just until they get good and caramelized, and then you're going to remove them from the oil. This recipe also calls to use 2 onions quartered and thinly sliced, and at this point, after you remove the sausages from that oil, you're going to add in another couple tablespoons of butter and actually saute the onions. But I chose to omit the onions, and I just kind of skipped over a lot of steps and just went to the potato point. So you're also wanting to add in about 1 clove of garlic, some salt, pepper to taste, and then I came in and added about 1 teaspoon of a smoked paprika. You can use smoked or regular paprika. I just choose to use the smoked because I love the flavor it gives it. So then once you're done cooking the onions, at that point, you can then add the potatoes. But like I said, I just kind of skipped over a couple steps because I wasn't using the onions. Then once the potatoes are slightly browned up, you are going to come in and add 1.5 cups of chicken stock. I used beef broth in this because that's what I had available in my fridge. So you can use either or. It really tasted delicious with the beef broth. Next, you're going to cover the pot with a lid, leaving a little space in between it just to let the steam escape. And you're gonna simmer that on medium-low for about 15 minutes, stirring occasionally just so that it doesn't burn. After 15 minutes, uncover the pot and allow the potatoes to cook and simmer for another 10 minutes until they are tender and the sauce is a little bit thickened. What I chose to do is actually come in and add a little bit of extra flavors to it. I had some frozen kale in my freezer and I thought that would taste really good with this. So I came in and added that frozen to the mixture, and then I just cooked it until that was thawed. It does say also if you want to add some parsley to this, you can. So once everything was done cooking, I came back in and added those sausages and just heated everything through. And then we had that with our buns and it was really, really delicious. I'd say it was more like a thick stew than a goulash, but it was a really, really enjoyable meal. For the next meal, we are going to do a breakfast for dinner meal. These are some of my favorite meals to make because I love breakfast at any time of the day. So we're gonna make an eggnog pancake with some cranberry maple syrup topping. I wanted to kind of test this recipe out a little bit just to see if it would be a good recipe for Christmas morning. To a large mixing bowl, you're gonna take 2 cups of an all-purpose flour. I just used an unbleached flour. Then you're gonna add 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 3/4 teaspoon of a kosher salt, 1/4 teaspoon of a ground nutmeg. I chose to use some fresh nutmeg and grate it in. I would definitely up the amount of nutmeg in this. It really did not come through in the final pancake. So you're just gonna mix that all together, push that aside, and then in another bowl, you're gonna take 2 large eggs, and then you're gonna lightly beat them. Add 1/2 cup of milk, 1.5 cups of eggnog, and then 1/4 cup of a cooking oil. I just used an avocado oil in this. I think what I'm gonna do in the future when I make these, because overall they were an okay pancake, I think instead of adding the milk, I'm just gonna up the amount of eggnog in this just to 2 cups because the eggnog taste really did not come through in the final pancake, and I really was hoping just to have that taste in it. And I was using a really good quality local eggnog too, which is delicious. So I was really surprised that it didn't come through in the end. You're gonna add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients and just lightly stir. I actually over stirred this and it resulted in kind of a flat pancake. So you just want to stir it just until everything's incorporated, and it is perfectly fine if it turns out a little bit lumpy. While the pancake batter was resting for a little bit, I added 1 cup of a pure maple syrup to a stock pot. You want to make sure you're using real stuff in this. Real maple syrup is required. So you're going to add that to a stock pot, and then you're going to add 1.5 cups of cranberry to that. You want to bring it to a boil over medium-high heat, and then once it comes to that boil, you're going to reduce the heat and let it simmer until the cranberries start to pop. It says it takes about 7 minutes. Then you want to crush the cranberries in the pan using the back of the spoon. You're going to stir in an additional 1/2 cup of cranberries and you're going to simmer this until those ones begin to pop. It says about 2 minutes. Once that happens, you are going to come in and add 2 tablespoons of butter and then just stir that all until that butter is melted. You want to serve this hot over top of the pancakes. So I'm going to get the pancakes started now. The recipe says to use a 1/4 cup of batter in for each pancake. I don't know why, for some reason I read it as 1/2 cup, and I normally don't make huge pancakes, but these ones turned out huge because I was using 1/2 cup and not 1/4 cup. I added a little bit of butter to the cast iron skillet, and you just want to cook them until they are nice and golden brown on each side. They will start to bubble up once they get good and cooked and ready to flip. Now my pancakes turned out really flat, but again, I think that's because I over beated the batter. If you over mix the batter, then what happens is you usually get flat pancakes because you really do want a lot of air in the batter. That's what makes a nice fluffy pancake. The other thing that really makes fluffy pancakes is actually separating the yolk from the egg whites, beating the egg whites, and then adding them in separately. But I just was following the directions for this. But these were really good with the exception of them not having enough eggnog taste to them. This cranberry sauce was amazing. It was like cranberry sauce that you could definitely even put on a turkey. Excellent, excellent recipe. For the next meal, we are going to make a recipe that was kind of a flop. It is a curry salmon bowl. I am not a huge fan of curry. I'm slowly starting to kind of change my mind about it and trying to make more dishes with it. When I make meals like Indian dishes, I like to send my adult daughter photos of the meal because she really enjoys Indian cuisine. Anyways, I sent her a photo of this, made the meal, and I was disappointed with the end result of it. And I told her, I messaged her back and I said, you know, the meal just didn't turn out very good. And she messaged me back and she says, I knew it wasn't good because you didn't send me a photo of the final product. She says, Mom, you're very predictable. You always send me pictures of meals that turn out really, really well. I thought it was rather funny. There's nothing like children to bring you back down to reality and kind of tell you an honest opinion of your personality traits. Anyways, let's get back to the meal. So you're gonna take 1.5 pounds of salmon. I just used some salmon from Sam's Club and I thawed it out. You're gonna add 2 tablespoons of curry powder and 2 tablespoons of an oil. I use an avocado oil. You can use olive oil also. You're just gonna mix that together and then you are going to smear it on top of your salmon. So the recipe says to preheat your oven to 475 degrees. Line a baking sheet with foil. Now I try to avoid using aluminum foil, so I used parchment paper. It also recommends to place the one oven rack close to the top of the oven, about 6 inches or so away from the heat source. As you can see, use aluminum foil because if you use parchment paper, 6 inches is pretty close and you will have a fire. I was able to get the fire put out really quickly, but definitely use like maybe a baking mat or aluminum foil like the recipe suggests. You want to cook salmon for about 10 minutes and then you're going to take it out and put it aside. So I'm getting my veggies prepped to make kind of like the curry topping that's going to go on top of it. This recipe calls to use 1 yellow onion thinly sliced and 1 bell pepper chopped. I didn't have any fresh bell pepper, so I just took some out of my freezer and just chopped that all up. I also had some squash, so I added that in as well. It doesn't call for it, but I just thought it would be a nice little filler. I was also getting some sourdough naans made up, or naans. I think it's called naans. I was also getting those done on the side as well. So once you get to all your veggies prepped, you're going to add about 1 tablespoon of oil to a skillet and you just want to saute these. Now because they were pre-frozen, they were really, really soggy. So if you're using frozen, it's just going to take an extra amount of time because you're going to have to cook that moisture out of the vegetables. There is the salmon coming out of the oven, good and cooked. So once that moisture is all out of the vegetables, then you just want to saute them until they are nice and brown. While my vegetables were browning, I took a can of my home canned chickpeas, drained them, and then rinsed them really well, and then just set them aside. So you also want to add to your skillet when your vegetables are almost done browning. You want to add 6 cloves of garlic minced and 2 tablespoons of freshly chopped ginger. I did not want to get my ginger out and grate it, so I had some dried ginger root. So I added probably about half a teaspoon of that dry ginger root to it. So you're gonna add salt, pepper, and then 2 tablespoons of curry powder to that. You're just gonna stir everything until that garlic starts to get fragrant and the ginger, and then you are going to add in your 14-ounce can of drained chickpeas and 1 14-ounce can of full-fat coconut milk. It also calls for 1 lime juice. I didn't have any fresh lime, so I just used a tablespoon of this lime juice. Once everything is good and heated through, you're gonna come in and add a handful of fresh basil torn. I didn't have fresh, I just used dried basil. And then I also added a handful of dried cilantro. The dried stuff does not even come close to the fresh stuff. I just did not want to go outside and pick fresh cilantro because it was dark and it was night and it was cold. So I just used dried, probably would have been way better with fresh. You're gonna take your salmon, put it at the bottom of the bowl. Now you can also add rice with this, but because I was using the naans, I just thought that was a good enough carb, but rice would have been delicious with this as well. And then you wanna top your salmon with your chickpea vegetable curry mixture. So this recipe was a little bit of a flop. I found that it was kind of missing some flavors, but it definitely could have been like the cilantro that I left out. So that is going to be the last meal on this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this week and I hope I gave you a little inspiration for your upcoming meals. Have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.